Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're breaking down one of the most diplomatically savage moments in recent history, and it happened right in the Canadian Parliament just hours ago. King Charles III just delivered what might be the most politically loaded speech from the throne in Canadian history, and if you think this was just ceremonial pageantry, you're missing the entire point. This was a masterclass in royal shade throwing, wrapped in constitutional tradition, aimed directly at Donald Trump's throat. While the mainstream media is calling it historic and ceremonial, what actually happened was a 75-year-old British monarch essentially telling the President of the United States to back off his northern neighbor. And he did it with the kind of diplomatic brutality that only centuries of royal training can produce. Here's what they're not telling you. This wasn't just Charles reading a government-written script. This was a carefully orchestrated international incident disguised as a throne speech, designed to humiliate Trump on the world stage while appearing to be nothing more than constitutional routine. By the end of this video, you'll understand why today's throne speech represents the biggest diplomatic middle finger in modern Commonwealth history, and why Trump's Canada annexation fantasy just got royally destroyed by a king who's apparently had enough of American imperialism. The setup, how we got here. To understand just how brutal this royal takedown really was, we need to understand how we got to the point where a British monarch felt compelled to publicly slap down an American president. For months, Donald Trump has been joking about making Canada the 51st state, except everyone knows Trump doesn't really joke. He trial balloons. He's been calling Justin Trudeau, Governor Trudeau, threatening massive tariffs, and generally treating Canada like a subsidiary of Trump Corporation rather than a sovereign nation. The response from Canadian politicians has been, let's call it diplomatic. Lots of careful statements about sovereignty and friendship. Very Canadian, very polite, very ineffective. But here's where it gets interesting. Mark Carney, Canada's new prime minister, decided that polite wasn't working. So he did something absolutely brilliant. He invited the one person on earth who outranks Trump in terms of global protocol and historical gravitas to come deliver a message. Think about the optics here for a moment. Trump loves to project power through ceremony and spectacle. Golden toilets, military parades, the whole authoritarian aesthetic. But there he was, watching a 75-year-old man in ceremonial robes command more respect and attention than Trump could ever dream of, while simultaneously dismantling his Canada annexation fantasies. The invitation itself was genius. Carney framed it as honoring constitutional tradition, which it was, but the subtext was unmistakable. We're bringing in the big guns to remind you who you're dealing with. Charles accepted immediately. Now, officially, this was about opening Parliament and delivering the government's agenda. Unofficially, this was about showing Trump that Canada has friends in very high places, and those friends have had enough of his imperial delusions. The stage was set for the most diplomatically significant throne speech in Canadian history, and Charles did not disappoint. The royal smackdown, what Charles actually said. Now let's break down what Charles actually said, because every word was chosen with surgical precision to maximum diplomatic damage. First, Charles opened by praising Canada as strong and free, directly quoting the national anthem. Sounds innocent enough, right? Wrong. In the context of Trump's annexation threats, this was Charles saying, Canada is not available for conquest, Donald. But it gets better. Charles said he has the greatest admiration for Canada's unique identity and praised the country for being known worldwide for bravery, sacrifice, diversity, and kindness. This wasn't just generic royal flattery. This was Charles systematically listing everything Trump's America is not. Bravery, Canada didn't elect a draft dodger. Sacrifice, Canada didn't abandon its allies in Afghanistan. Diversity, Canada didn't build walls to keep people out. Kindness, Canada didn't separate migrant children from their parents. Charles was essentially saying, here's what a real country looks like, Donald. Take notes. Then came the nuclear option. Charles acknowledged that Canada faces unprecedented challenges and that the country's relationship with the U.S. is changing. In diplomatic speak, this is roughly equivalent to saying, your southern neighbor has lost its damn mind and we're adjusting accordingly. But the most devastating line was this: Canadians can give themselves far more than any foreign power on any continent can ever take away. The strategic brilliance of royal warfare. What makes this royal smackdown so brilliant is how impossible it is for Trump to respond effectively. How do you attack a king without looking like a complete fool? Trump's entire brand is based on dominance and never backing down from a fight. But what's he going to do here? tweet insults at the British monarch, call Charles loser king or failing monarch, any response Trump makes will look petty and unhinged compared to the dignity and gravitas Charles projected during the throne speech. Charles spoke with the authority of centuries of constitutional tradition behind him. Trump would be responding from his social media account like an angry teenager. The genius of using Charles for this message is that it elevates the entire conflict to a level where Trump can't compete. This isn't just Canada versus America anymore. This is the British Commonwealth versus Trump's imperial ambitions. Charles represents 14 countries as head of state, with a combined population of over 150 million people. When he speaks, he's not just representing Britain, he's representing a significant portion of the democratic world that Trump has spent years alienating. The timing was also perfect. Charles delivered this speech just as Trump is dealing with domestic challenges and international isolation. Having one of the world's most respected figures publicly dismiss his Canada fantasies couldn't have come at a worse time for Trump's ego. But perhaps most importantly, Charles gave voice to what America's allies have been thinking but couldn't say directly. The subtext of his speech was clear. Trump's America is unreliable, unstable, and unworthy of the respect it once commanded. This wasn't just about Canada. This was about the entire international order that Trump has been trying to dismantle. Charles was drawing a line in the sand and saying this far and no further. The strategic implications are enormous. Charles just gave diplomatic cover to every country that's been quietly moving away from American leadership. If the King of England can publicly dismiss Trump's threats, so can everyone else. The constitutional genius behind the insult. Here's what makes this whole situation even more beautiful from a constitutional perspective. Trump literally cannot do anything about it. Charles isn't just any foreign leader. He's Canada's head of state. He has every right, indeed every obligation, to defend Canadian sovereignty. When he speaks in the Canadian Parliament, he's speaking as the King of Canada, not the King of England. This creates a fascinating legal and diplomatic situation. Trump has been threatening to impose tariffs and economic pressure on Canada to force annexation. But Charles just reminded everyone that Canada has constitutional protections that make Trump's threats legally meaningless. Canada is a constitutional monarchy with the same head of state as the United Kingdom. Any threat to Canadian sovereignty is, by extension, a threat to the Crown itself. Trump isn't just threatening Canada, he's threatening the British Commonwealth realm. This transforms the entire dynamic. Instead of bullying a smaller neighbor, Trump is now effectively threatening the constitutional order of multiple countries simultaneously. The optics are terrible for him. Charles also reminded everyone that Canada's constitutional system is fundamentally different from America's. Canada didn't have a revolution, it evolved. Canada didn't break away from Britain. It grew into independence while maintaining constitutional ties. This makes Canada inherently different from the United States in ways that Trump clearly doesn't understand. Canada isn't a republic that can be absorbed into another republic. It's a constitutional monarchy with deep institutional ties to a global commonwealth. The throne speech was Charles's way of saying, you don't understand what you're dealing with, Donald. This isn't just about Canada. This is about an entire constitutional tradition that predates your country. It's also worth noting that Charles delivered this speech in both English and French, emphasizing Canada's bilingual identity and its connection to both British and French constitutional traditions. This was another subtle reminder that Canada's identity is complex and international in ways that Trump's America simply isn't. The international implications. The international reaction to Charles's throne speech has been fascinating to watch, and it reveals just how isolated Trump has become on the world stage. European leaders are praising Charles for defending democratic values and constitutional order. They're treating this as a moment when the Commonwealth stood up to American imperialism, which is exactly how Charles intended it to be received. The contrast with Trump's international standing couldn't be more stark. While Charles was receiving standing ovations in the Canadian Parliament, Trump was being mocked and criticized around the world for his annexation threats. This creates a diplomatic nightmare for Trump's team. They wanted to project American strength and dominance, but instead they've been publicly humiliated by a 75-year-old monarch who made Trump look like an amateur on the international stage. The speech also sends a clear message to other American allies who have been quietly concerned about Trump's authoritarian tendency. Charles just demonstrated that it's possible to stand up to Trump without destroying important relationships or abandoning democratic values. This could encourage other leaders to be more direct in their criticism of Trump's policy. If the King of England can publicly dismiss Trump's threats, why can't the President of France or the Chancellor of Germany? The Commonwealth angle is particularly significant because it represents an alternative power structure to American hegemony. Charles's speech reminded everyone that the English-speaking world doesn't begin and end with the United States. Countries like Australia, New Zealand, and the UK have been uncomfortable with Trump's approach to international relations. Charles just gave them permission to be more vocal about their concern. The economic implications are also significant. Charles emphasized Canada's plans to build new alliances and develop new trading relationships. This is a direct threat to American economic influence in North America. If Canada successfully diversifies its economy away from dependence on the United States, it undermines one of Trump's key leverage points. Charles just announced that this diversification isn't just possible, it's inevitable. What this means for Trump. So what does this royal smackdown mean for Trump's political future and his Canada annexation fantasies? First, it's a massive diplomatic humiliation. Trump's entire foreign policy is based on the idea that he can intimidate smaller countries into submission. Charles just proved that this approach doesn't work when those countries have powerful friends. Second, it undermines Trump's credibility with his own base. Trump sold himself as the ultimate dealmaker who could bend world leaders to his will. Instead, he got publicly schooled by a constitutional monarch who made him look weak and ineffective. Third, it eliminates any possibility of the Canada annexation actually happening. Charles just reminded everyone that Canada has constitutional protections and international support that make Trump's threats meaningless. But perhaps most importantly, Charles just demonstrated that Trump's America is no longer the dominant force in international relations that it once was. The throne speech was a clear signal that the rest of the world is moving on without American leadership. The irony is delicious. Trump wanted to make America great again, but his behavior has been so erratic and destructive that even America's closest allies are publicly rejecting American influence. Charles's throne speech will be remembered as the moment when the international community stopped pretending to take Trump seriously. It was diplomatic warfare at its finest, delivered with a smile and wrapped in constitutional tradition. Trump's Canada annexation fantasy just got royally destroyed, and there's absolutely nothing he can do about it. The king has spoken, and the message is clear. Canada is not for sale, America is not in charge, and Trump's imperial ambitions are nothing more than the delusions of a failed leader. Game, set, and matched to His Majesty King Charles III. Long may he reign, and long may he continue to put wannabe emperors in their place. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Charles's diplomatic masterpiece, and don't forget to subscribe for more analysis of how the global power structure is shifting away from Trump's America.